Our first mystery is called Lost at Sea.
Tell me exactly what happened.
It was a dark, moonless night. At 12 o'clock, when we were about 10 miles off Point Breeze, I retired to my cabin, leaving my husband on deck. We were alone on the boat. In a few minutes, hearing loud shouts, I joined him again. We could hear a boat approaching, running without lights, as were we. My husband told me to return to the cabin, which I did. Soon after doing so, a bump, tramping feet, and loud swearing told me our visitors had come aboard. I went up, and just as I stepped on deck, a man put a gun against my ribs and told me to be quiet. My husband was engaged in a terrible fight with the two others. They must have known he always carried that leather bag of loose diamonds, because when he dropped it in the fight, one of them picked it up from the deck. They finally knocked him unconscious and took him to their boat. After binding and gagging me, as you know, I was found drifting next morning by that fisherman.
How was your husband dressed?
It was very hot. He had no shirt on, but wore dark trousers.
Shoes or tennis slippers?
Why, shoes, of course.
Well, it's amazing to me that you expect to collect insurance on your diamond on such a flimsy yarn. You and your husband will be lucky if you are not prosecuted.
Where did the elaborate story fall down? It would have been impossible for Mrs. Rollins to have seen a man pick up from the deck the bag of diamonds. On a dark, moonless night at sea, one literally can't see his hand before his face. The repose of darkness is deeper on the water than on land. Quote by Victor Hugo. Our second mystery is entitled The Perfect Crime.
Peter Johannes had one burning ambition: to commit a perfect crime. After much thinking and careful planning, he chose burglary for his experiment and a large brownstone mansion for the scene of the action. Learning its occupants had left town, he arrayed himself in a business suit of conservative cut, flung a light topcoat over his arm, picked up a Gladstone bag covered with foreign labels, and set out. He had ascertained, of course, when the policeman patrolling that beat was farthest away. At such a time, he drove up in his swanky sport roadster, swung jauntily to the sidewalk, skipped up the steps, and fitted a skeleton key into the lock, which yielded easily. So far, so good, he thought. Inside, he adjusted a black mask to his eyes and silk gloves to his hands. The former for a bit of local color he couldn't resist. The latter for more practical purposes. What a jolly thing this burglaring was. He quickly filled his Gladstone with silver and other valuables. Hurrying out, he removed his gloves after closing the door.
Done, and not a single clue left.
As he was about to descend the steps, he saw out of the corner of his eye the policeman rounding the corner. Feigning disinterest, he quickly pushed the bell button and stood there whistling.
Hey, you. What are you doing there? Them people ain't home.
Howdy, officer. How goes it? I know they're not home. Been trying to raise someone for 5 minutes. Annoying, too, after running out to see them. Oh well, I'll be going along.
You bet you will. Right to the hoosegow. Your story I might have believed, but... Come on now, I'm taking you down.
Alas for the perfect crime. What caused our hero's arrest? Asked Professor Fordney of his class. Alas, Peter Johannes had forgotten to remove his mask on leaving the house. Whoever thinks a perfect work to see thinks what ne'er was, nor is, nor e'er shall be. Pope. Our third and final mystery is entitled Death Backstage. Claudia Mason, beautiful and popular young actress, was found lying across the chaise lounge in her elaborately furnished dressing room, dead from a bullet wound in the temple. She had sold her jewels, and with an heroic gesture partially paid her many debts. Near Claudia's right hand, Sergeant Reynolds picked up the revolver with which she had been killed, and after careful examination said,
No fingerprints, of course. Gosh, Fortney, there's 2 rocks she didn't sell.
he exclaimed, pointing to a large emerald on her left hand and a diamond on her right.
Call Maria, her maid. I want to find out who this fellow is,
Said the professor, nodding toward a man's photograph signed Juan.
This is evidently addressed to him.
He said, passing over a note which read,
Dear Juan, I am so despondent. The money from my jewels was not nearly enough. Claudia.
Not many of these dames kill themselves over their debts.
muttered Reynolds as he went to call Maria. The maid entered the room, sobbing and hysterical.
Who is Juan?
Asked Professor Fordney.
He's the leading man in the show.
Well, why wasn't this note delivered to him?
I forgot it.
You found her?
Yes, when I came to help her dress, she was like that.
Is Juan in his dressing room now?
I believe so.
When Reynolds brought him into Claudia's room, he dropped to his knees beside the dead girl.
My God, she's killed herself.
No, she hasn't, young man. She was murdered.
Do you agree with Reynolds or with the professor? There were no fingerprints on the gun which killed Claudia Mason. She could not have shot herself in the temple and then wiped off the revolver. The murderer neglected to get her fingerprints on the gun. A fool cannot be an actor, though an actor may act a fool's part. Sophocles.